Want to welcome on into the program Daniel Flesch from the Heritage Foundation. Daniel, always great to have you folks on. So here on WTN in Nashville, Tennessee, we just ran most of Benjamin Netanyahu's speech, Donald Trump's as well.
This call is no longer being recorded.
And Daniel, are you there? Are you with us?
Yes, sorry about that. I'm here. Good to be with you.
Okay, very good. So just real quick, because I know that our time is limited, give me your thoughts on President Trump's speech.
I think it was remarkable. He covered a lot of ground, and the main message to come away with it is that the strength of the American and Israeli people is unmatched, particularly when they work together. He brought in biblical references. He brought in the strength of the current relationship, the unity between him and the prime minister, and the recognition that Israel is fighting a war for the West, and that the Islamists, the jihadists, the anti-Semites out there are losing and must lose this war. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said when he ended his speech, he said, "God bless America, God bless Israel, and critically, I think, God bless the covenant between these two promised lands." So the strength of the U.S.'s relationship is very strong, is a potential for a new day in the Middle East. But of course, the Middle East has a way of always surprising you. And I'm not going to hold my breath just yet as talks now begin in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. But yet the Jewish world, the Israeli people are breathing a sigh of relief that the hostages are home.
Let me ask you this. How big of a deal is it that there are reports that Hamas has not released all of the remains of the hostages that they killed? They released all the living hostages, but they say that they magically cannot find the remains of, I don't know, it sounds like, 15, 20 of the hostages that they killed. How big of a deal is that? They claim that they can't find them. I believe that they were not negotiating in good faith, but I could be wrong.
So you're not wrong. I'd say the most important thing is the living hostages are home, because now Hamas has lost its most important leverage to forestall an Israeli military response should it choose and need to begin the war again, because Hamas would abrogate the terms of the deal. The fact that it cannot find all the remaining deceased hostages is actually a testament to the fact that it's not just Hamas that has held these hostages. There's other terrorist groups inside Gaza, including Islamic Jihad and the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, both of whom have held hostages. So Hamas isn't the only party here. They're obviously the most important and powerful one, but they're trying to locate the remains. And not to mention, as we've known of these last 2 years, Palestinians themselves, so-called ordinary Palestinians, including members or workers of the UN Relief Works Agency, the Refugee Agency for Palestinians, have held hostages. So locating them is very important. I think it is it's ongoing. It's been unclear exactly when the deadline was to release all of the dead hostages. It was 72 hours this morning for the living ones. But again, it's not going to prevent at least this phase one from being implemented. Israel's already started to withdraw back to parts of the Gaza Strip. And also, I don't want your listeners to miss out on this. The fact is, Israel's releasing nearly 2,000 convicted Palestinian terrorists, many of whom have significant blood on their hands going back even to the 1990s, in exchange for the release of these 20 living hostages.
So what happens to those terrorists? We have been talking about that. What happens to those terrorists? I mean, do they go right back into the fight? Part of the conversation this morning is that there's a discussion now where there's a power vacuum. We may see civil war. And so people are saying Hamas is out there and they're going after people that they thought may have been helpful to Israel. And there's just a discussion about unrest in Gaza. What do you think is next for Gaza?
Yeah, so the terrorists themselves that are being released, it's a mixed bag of where they're going. Many are being returned back to Gaza. That's where they came from before they were arrested and convicted. Some are going to Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and others are being deported abroad to third-party countries. And you're right, there's already, over the weekend, we saw harrowing images and video. The mainstream media was not covering this, but of Hamas killing, arresting and harming other Palestinians as they reassert control and show their dominance. It's also notable that Hamas somehow has found their uniforms again, and as they're patrolling the Gazan streets, they have their uniforms on, whereas when they're fighting the IDF, they somehow lose their uniforms. But there is a power vacuum. Hamas even said in response to the president's 20-point plan the other week, is that we will not relinquish control or at least be a party to governing Gaza going forward. So that's why this next phase 2 of the president's 20-point plan, it's really up in the air on what that looks like because Hamas wants to be a part of Gaza going forward. Israel still retains it cannot be. That's why Israel will still retain some control of Gaza and have security operations if need be. But it remains to be seen for what the future of Gaza is. A lot will hopefully come out of this Sharm el-Sheikh meeting. But again, like I said earlier, I'm not holding my breath just yet.
Well, one of the things, I mean, part of Trump's 20-point plan is Hamas was supposed to be extricated from Gaza. And I mean, that was a big part of the reason why Israel and all of these other nations agreed to it. But now that they don't have any real leverage because they don't have any living hostages, how feasible is it that they're going to be able to get in there? And if Hamas refuses to leave, what options does Israel have?
So the reason that this 20-point plan came together and then phase one, this exchange came together is because of the pressure from Hamas's patrons and supporters in the Arab world, namely Qatar and Turkey, as well as Egypt. And Iran has kind of been sidelined since the 12-day war earlier this summer. So the extent that these countries can impose on Hamas to say you are no longer going to be part of a governing structure in Gaza, or you're going to be demilitarized or disarmed, and moreover, perhaps there's other countries that will take them if they are extricated, then it becomes much more feasible. But there's no one that can force or compel Hamas to disarm short of the IDF. So for Israel to accept this deal, you couldn't really turn down this deal because the president was coming to you. You're going to get your living hostages back. And for the most part, Israel's military aims had been achieved in Gaza. So it was an opportunity for Israel to take a break from this war, for the reservists to return home, to get the hostages out, but realizing that unlike in previous conflicts, or unlike right now in Lebanon, where Israel has gone south of the border, but still retains operational freedom in southern Lebanon, Israel's going to maintain, the IDF will maintain a presence inside Gaza and be able to conduct operations should the need arise. So it's very unclear how phase two will be implemented, particularly because Hamas says we're not going to disarm. But yet, at the end of the day, the broader strategic developments here are notable. The ground has shifted. The Indonesian president was talking about coming to Israel. He's actually offered troops to help stabilize Gaza, perhaps join the Abraham Accords. So the big picture is changing while still there's a lot of tactics to be figured out.
Well, it is interesting because you do have all of these other nations, the coalition, if you will, that Donald Trump was able to pull together. It is just incredible over the last 2 years. And I guess part of my final question as we wrap this up, I know that our time is limited, is when it comes to rebuilding Gaza, what does that look like? Do you think that because there's going to be this disagreement over what happens with Hamas, who is sitting on this board as they talk about rebuilding Gaza, do you think that it's feasible that this will be rebuilt here in the next 10, 15 years?
It's possible. It's possible. I'm not going to put a number on it, but certainly it's possible. And that's probably what the summit's going to be about, is trying to get commitments from the Gulf countries and other Arab countries to say, okay, what kind of investment are you going to put into Gaza? Not only from a manpower in terms of security perspective, but really from a financial one. How committed are you to rebuilding Gaza for the Gazan people? And of course, a big, a bug in that ointment really is Hamas. And until Hamas is no longer a participant in Gaza's political or security infrastructure, the fact is they can disrupt and play spoiler all day long. So it's really kind of a chicken and the egg situation, but no one can compel Hamas to leave, but yet you need Hamas to no longer be a party there in order to rebuild. So again, I come back to what kind of pressure can the Arab countries apply on Hamas for them to no longer be a party in Gaza going forward. But this rebuild will take a generation. And it's not only rebuilding the infrastructure, the buildings, the roads, etc. It's also rebuilding the population. What I mean by that is this is the most radicalized population probably on the face of the planet. They are anti-Semitic. They do not want to build a Palestine. They want to destroy Israel. And so trying to de-radicalize that population is a necessary ingredient moving forward. But that also will only take a generation to do so.
Oh, it's interesting because we're talking before you came on. You see all the people celebrating in Gaza, yet I can guarantee you they're not giving Donald Trump any credit. They're just happy that their people are home. But, we'll have to see ultimately what happens next. Real quick, the last question, I promise. Let's say there is a civil war that happens in Gaza. And let's say that these warring, various terrorist organizations start battling each other. Whose responsibility is it to deal with that?
That's a great question, and the answer is essentially it's the Gazans themselves.
Okay.
There's no force that's gonna impose itself in a situation short of the IDF, and the IDF will only do that so long as Israel and its border communities are no longer threatened. But right now, it is a bit of a power vacuum. The United States is not going to send troops. Egypt will not. Certainly, they've been building the strongest border wall in the world along the Gaza-Egypt border to not allow Palestinians into the Sinai. So it's unclear. The Palestinian Authority has no role right now in Gaza. Obviously, Mahmoud Abbas wants to have it, and no other Arab party can deploy troops there. So it really is an opportunity for Gazans to try to reclaim the Strip for themselves against Hamas. But if Hamas is not disarmed, then certainly they are still the governing power.
All right, Daniel Flesch from the Heritage Foundation, thank you very much for joining us here, certainly at the last minute. A great analysis as always, and we'll hope to talk to you again soon. All right, I want to get to this just very quickly because I think that it shows you the absurdity of some in the mainstream media. I want to talk about George Stephanopoulos. Did you see this interview? Just kind of careening and ricocheting all over the place. Joe, did you see this interview with George Stephanopoulos?
Well, I saw portions
of
it.
Vance?
I didn't spend my time, which I try not to, on George Stephanopoulos' show. But I did see the portions of it, especially the ones that you posted over the weekend on social media. Yeah.
So George Stephanopoulos is being blasted on the socials because he cut off J.D. Vance, who was not allowed to respond to specific allegations regarding Tom Homan. Of course, Donald Trump's supporters are. And the accusation is that Homan accepted a bribe. So let me show this to you, that video. And this is J.D. Vance and George Stephanopoulos.
I don't know what tape you're referring to, George. I saw media reports that Tom Homan accepted a bribe. There's no evidence of that. And here's, George, why fewer and fewer people watch your program and why you're losing credibility. Wow. Because you're talking for now 5 minutes with the Vice President of the United States about this story regarding Tom Homan, a story that I've read about, but I don't even know the video that you're talking about. Meanwhile, low-income women can't get food because the Democrats and Chuck Schumer have shut down the government. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to pay our troops because Chuck Schumer has shut down the government.
Yeah. All right. So do you know that part of the interview between Stephanopoulos and J.D. Vance, do you know that was longer than the questioning about Israel? Did you also know that Stephanopoulos didn't even ask about the government shutdown? Now, these allegations have been floating for a while regarding Tom Homan. The accusation is that Homan accepted a $50,000 bribe. This was during Biden's administration, where FBI officials posed as businessmen who allegedly, they say, paid Homan $50,000 to steer immigration-related services to their company after Homan joined a future Trump administration. So they say that they've got Homan on video or audio accepting a $50,000 bribe. Again, this is in August of 2024, so the election at the time is 3 months away. And Biden's DOJ is apparently trying to set up Homan? Is that what was going on? Because that's what it sounds like. And so the Democrats are now out there in the House of Representatives trying to get this investigation into Tom Homan going. And the Trump administration says there's no evidence, and we're not going to do anything about this because there is no proof that Tom Homan did anything wrong. So Trump administration basically saying we're not going to entertain this.
How long until we get to the part of the 20-point peace plan where developers can go in and make Gaza the Riviera of the Middle East?
Well, I don't know about the Riviera for a while, because you take a look at what you have. You have to get people taken care of first. But it's going to start really essentially immediately. I mean, they're going to have to start by removing a lot of the structures that you see that are down to the ground. I mean, it's blasted. This is like a demolition site. Almost the entire site is. So you have to get rid of what you have there. You have structures that are very dangerous. They're falling down. If they haven't fallen, they're going to fall down of their own volition. So that process, Peter, is going to start pretty much immediately.
Yeah, and that was Donald Trump talking about the rebuilding of Gaza. But one of the things that George Stephanopoulos, in this battle between he and J.D. Vance, was this perpetual accusation that Tom Homan did something wrong.
You are focused on a bogus story. You're insinuating criminal wrongdoing against a guy who has done nothing wrong instead of focusing on the fact that our country is struggling because our government's shut down. Let's talk about the real issues, George. I think the American people would benefit much more from that than from you going down some weird left-wing rabbit hole where the facts clearly show that Tom Homan didn't engage in any criminal wrongdoing.
It's not a weird left-wing rabbit hole. I didn't insinuate anything. I asked you whether Tom Homan accepted $50,000, as was heard on an audio tape recorded by the FBI in September 2024, and you did not answer the question. Thank you for your time this morning.
No,
Well,
George,
Governor
I
J.B.
said that I
Pritzker's
don't.
Up next, we'll be right back.
They potted him down. They turned. I mean,
That's the vice president of the United States. They just did that too.
yep, that's exactly right.
Where are the people screaming about censorship now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can I just play for you the how that interview started, how that conversation started? Listen to how Stephanopoulos asks the question.
The White House border czar Tom Homan was recorded on an FBI surveillance tape in September 2024, accepting $50,000 in cash. Did he keep that money or give it back?
So no context to the question, no setup, nothing. Just, hey, Tom Homan took this $50,000. Did he keep it? He didn't even say allegedly. Nothing. I didn't hear the word accused in there as well. So has Stephanopoulos, I would ask, has Stephanopoulos actually seen this tape? Does he know that this happened for a fact? So the whole setup is just slimy.
George, you've covered the story ad nauseum. Tom Homan did not take a bribe. It's a ridiculous smear. And the reason you guys are going after Tom Homan so aggressively is because he's doing the job of enforcing the law. I think it's really preposterous. I know Tom. I think that he's a good man. He gets death threats. He gets attacked. He gets constantly threatened by people because he has the audacity to want to enforce the country's immigration laws.
Yep.
I think that it would be a much more interesting story about why is it that Tom Homan, who is simply enforcing Americans' immigration laws, is getting constantly harassed and threatened to the point of death threats. That's a much more interesting question that I think journalists should focus on. We can agree to disagree on that question.
Well, wait, you said he didn't take a bribe, but I'm not sure you answered the question. Are you saying that he did not accept the $50,000?
823, Nashville's Morning News. So you could just tell that Stephanopoulos clearly had an agenda going into that interview, and J.D. Vance just took him out. And I love that. He was, by the way, did you notice, Joan, on the socials, do you know what they're now calling J.D. Vance?
No.
48. I do love that he absolutely punked George Stephanopoulos.
That's why he cut him off. He knew he got punked.
He knew that he got punked.
Okay, we have an accident this morning on Clarksville Pike at Rosa Parks Boulevard. But otherwise this morning, not a lot of delays on the roadways. Columbus Day, so not a lot of traffic on the roads. And you'll find no big delays on 24, 40, or 65 heading in. Traffic every 10 minutes, every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Hey, Will Nunley joining us. Now, just for folks that missed Will, he was on the air with us on Friday. Will, you own some, and I apologize, I don't have your official intro in front of me and how to introduce you, but you own some radio stations in the area out there in Bucksnort. You're a local farmer. You do some reports for Fox, if I'm not mistaken, Fox Nation or something. But you are on the ground out there and in Humphreys County. So let's talk about where we are. What is the latest in the investigation?
Well, I feel like at this point, it's the information is going to be a little bit more slow, in day to day, because this is the continuance of the methodical part of all of this, where you have the federal agencies coordinating with the state agencies to go through and try to understand what happened, and there's not an immediate time frame on that.
Yeah.
I know that we all live, especially us as journalists, we live in a world of we want answers just as fast as we can get them. But in this case, when you look at a scene that has just been destroyed the way that this one has, they have to go through it and understand what chemicals may have been on site, what the reaction may have been, what if there was negligence, what may have happened there, or if there was an intentional act, which we don't want to think about. But as they've noted in previous press conferences, all possibilities are on the table with this.
Here's what my question would be, and Joan, you can chime in too, because you spent a lot of years in Washington, D.C., but you're right, Will Nunley joining us. They are bringing out all of these really hardcore federal investigative units, ones that, investigated previous terror attacks. We don't know what happened here. But is that protocol, or is that something that they're doing specifically for this case? Do you have any idea?
Did we lose him too?
Did we lose him too?
The line sounds like
Will's
it's still
still here.
open. There we go.
All right, well, start over.
Okay, I'm sorry. Was that a question for me?
Yeah, it was a question for you.
Okay, I apologize. No, yes. I mean, this is going to be. You could tell very quickly that this was something that they were treating extremely serious and bringing every resource that they have to bear, and that's not surprising. Another thing is, so many of us. I kind of go back to two things that stick out. I want to kind of go back to the emergency response as well. Two things that stick out in my mind about this. One, the amount of resources that were rushing to the scene immediately because they knew this plant. They knew that there were a lot of lives at stake. They knew the seriousness of this. So the emergency response that we saw was tremendous. And something that will stick out in my mind as well is all the helicopters and things that were the team of ambulances that were responding immediately that didn't have anyone to take away. They stayed there for a few moments. You could see them all gathering, and then they didn't have anyone to take away. That's something that just on the ground as a witness will stick with me. But to your point, we were seeing immediately ATF. We saw every TBI, SUV, and crime lab that you could amass within an hour starting to arrive on that scene just as quickly as they could get there from Nashville. So I think that this is something they have not had to really, there was an incident prior in 2014, I believe, at this facility, but something like this and to happen in a way that so spectacularly affected the lives of thousands of people in either direction that were, pseudo witnesses, I guess, to this explosion. This is a large scale endeavor that is going to take a tremendous amount of time and resources, I think, to get to the bottom of.
Joan was talking about how this is a 2-mile debris field.
Oh, easily, yes. So they keep saying about a half mile in either direction, and I think for the immediate impact zone, that's accurate. But yes, there have been pieces of debris found for at least 2 miles or more in either direction. And you could tell that they designed the campus, unfortunately, just in case, in my opinion, something like this were to happen. I mean, this is a very massive campus, and they separated these buildings so that way you weren't putting all these personnel into one particular lab. They were, spread out in a series of different buildings, but just in case the worst were to happen. But yes, this was the blast, not only the impact from this, but the debris field is considerable.
So, Will, they're talking about getting to the debris field. The actual site itself may take some time because there may be some unexploded material still there. What do you know about that?
Right. We've had several controlled detonations over the weekend, with the last one happening yesterday, and they do send out a little bit of warning. We got a warning yesterday from Humphreys County specifically saying we are going to have some controlled detonations today. I think they want to reassure people, calm them down, because that is something that they immediately were worried about going into what could be affected in the other buildings where chemicals knocked loose in other buildings that could have began to, have a reaction. What are the chain reactions for this? I don't think that's done because we see that they are still days after having these controlled explosions, and this is just makes this all the more difficult to try to get to these areas and begin their investigation.
Do you know what would be interesting? I don't know. They must have had security cameras on site. Have you heard anything about checking out security cam video?
Yeah, you're not the first to ask about that. I think that that's going to be a tricky question because, in my experience, even covering with severe weather, the moment that you have an impact that you lose power or you lose communications, that even if it's controlled in the cloud, you may get a couple of frames of something, but they don't often give you the view you had hoped. It will be interesting to see if any of that is ever made public, if there were cameras in other buildings, because I'm not exactly sure. When you look at the aerial footage of that particular building, you don't see other buildings very close to it. So the only hope I would think would be external cameras on another building that may have been pointing that direction to see something. But I will note that when this happened, it destroyed electricity for the area. I mean, the electric company had to come out and repair transformers, repair lines to neighborhoods and landowners around because of the shock wave or the impact of the blast. So you can imagine what it did to the infrastructure on campus. So could you have had an off-site recording of that and get a frame or two of something? Yes. It'll be interesting if that's enough to actually help investigators figure this out.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about the community, generally speaking. This is a very small community. I spent the weekend talking to folks that are out there, and they do describe a community where everybody knows everyone. And you're talking about 16 people that are dead.
Yes.
This has to be just devastating to the community.
It is, and it's all anyone can talk about, rightly so. It's all anyone can focus on. When you go in the grocery store, anywhere I've gone this weekend, we had a small community festival to put on the next day, and there were several of us sitting around saying, "Is this right? Should we do this? What do we do? What are we supposed to feel in this moment?" Because the uniqueness of we experienced this along with what happened, and I just mean we all felt this impact. We all know the moment that this happened, and so we feel yet another connection to it, just even though we're close to where the site happened. I personally didn't know anyone that was, that lost their life in this, but everyone has a connection, it seems, to the site. And a lot of prayer vigils have been happening over the weekend. We had a couple here in Perry County. There was one in Hickman County as well that you may have seen some images of. That's what a lot of folks are resorting to. Now you have the folks that are trying to raise money, of course, for the families, and but there is a sense of hopelessness a little bit during these first few days of how do we mourn this, what do we do, but it is certainly the focus, I would say, of everyone, no matter your walk of life out here in these communities. They're thinking about this.
Will, real quick, what do we know about the company itself? I know that there have been stories out there about how they've had some issues in the past, some lawsuits, that kind of a thing. Does the company seem to be, is the company cooperating with the investigation? It sounds like they must be.
From what law enforcement has indicated, yes, that they are grieving this as well, that they worked hand in hand with these employees on site for years, that they are taking this very personal. And the cooperation seems to be there. Speaking personally and as a citizen, and I hope this doesn't give me hot water, but I think that eventually the question will become the risk and the reward, because this is now the second notable incident at this facility where an explosion has happened, and this one was no small incident. And of course, that's an understood hazard when you are literally an explosives company. But will this company continue at this location? Will the citizens allow it? Will the town leaders say enough is enough? This is too much of a risk to have in our backyard. No one has done that officially, so I don't want to imply that. That's just my curiousness as a citizen of the area, and also, a journalist that's going to be asking these questions, is eventually what is the risk and reward of having a facility like this in our backyard when it now has such a lethal history? I would imagine that's going to come up eventually.
Well, we'll talk about that first. I don't know how much detail you have on that first episode. I know that there was an incident where some employees said that they were exposed to hazardous materials. In our remaining moments, talk about what you know about previous issues.
It's very light. Unfortunately, that was a little bit before my reporting time here, so I'm not as familiar with that incident. But there have been several TOSHA violations over the years that have been resurfaced. Not quite to this scale, but again, any type of violation in these types of environments can be very serious. And it's going to be interesting to see if it was something like that may have been cited in the past that has contributed to what we experienced here last week.
It'll be interesting, and you may not know or have an answer to this, but do you have any indication, or are they looking at any long-term environmental issues in that specific area?
I think it's still unknown because what the question has to be answered is what was the chemical on site, and we still don't know that. And then once that chemical name or the reaction that may have been caused as a byproduct is known, I think that's absolutely a consideration. What could first responders have been breathing in when they were responding immediately up there? There are going to be lots of questions. And did they have the proper safety gear in some of these rural fire departments to be dealing with that? Or did they have the equipment they needed when they had an incident in an explosives facility? So,
boy, you bring up a great point, Will, because we all know what happened with the 9/11 first responders.
Yes. Yeah, you run into danger, as all of them do, but these rural fire departments may not have that breathing apparatus. They may not have been wearing it, not knowing to. So, again, we will look to identification of these chemicals, what type of reaction may have happened as a result. And then that's going to, I think, open up a few more questions. And the environmental and health effects are very much in consideration.
Will Nunley, people can follow you on X at your name, WILLNUNLEY.
That's correct.
All right, follow Will, and Will, very much appreciate your insight and continued reporting. And what, the show's over already?
Already?
Boy, this show just flew by, didn't it, Joan?
Flew.
It's almost like the president was talking for 2 hours.
It's like Give Peace a Chance Day. That's what it is. I'm going to spare everyone,
please,
the singing from John Lennon.
Oh.
I could have.
We could be spared of all of John Lennon if you...
Yeah, and Yoko, too.
Yeah.
Song's actually satanic.
Yes, I've heard this.
All right, let's move on.
You buried the lead today.
Did I?
I didn't hear once you wish anybody a happy Columbus Day.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed it.
It's back on the calendar, boys.
It is.
It's not going to get any play today, but I think we should acknowledge that Donald Trump has made this Columbus Day once again.
I love that. Happy Columbus Day, Chris.
Thank you.
Why are we still?
It's not Indigenous persons anymore?
It's
not. No?
It's not.
Okay.
Why are we working?
What do you say to all those Indigenous people, though? Like,
yeah.
I mean, they got to be, indignant that their Indigenous Peoples Day was canceled. Did you get that? Indignant, Indigenous. I thought that was pretty good.
I like the alliteration.
Don't you like that?
I'm a huge fan.
Sure. I've had a rough day. All right, so
dude, you've had a historic show. Are you kidding me?
Right, I know.
You got to carry this live. What? Like, how often on the morning show do you get to carry a once in a lifetime press conference like this?
How often on the morning show, Sam, you're gonna love this. How often on the morning show do I get to carry the commercial discrepancy sheet down to the sales office and tell them how many commercials we missed carrying Donald Trump?
It looks like a phone book. Sam showed me that earlier.
Yeah, let me tell you something. I have really enjoyed working here.
Dan had to write a hostage ransom note on his notebook and show it to the live stream audience.
Oh, did you see what I did? Oh, you didn't see what I did?
No.
I don't know if I still have it in here somewhere. I like to have personal communication with the folks watching on YouTube. You see that? So I wrote a note to the people on YouTube. I'm going to get in so much trouble. Sales is going to kill me as Donald Trump was doing the weave.
Were you at like 45 minutes of nonstop Trump?
Yeah. Well, it was. How long did that thing go?
The speech went on for over an hour, and Dan and I kept kind of off air going, you can tell when he's not looking at the prompter.
Oh, yeah.
There was probably 15 minutes of prompter speech and 45 minutes of Donald Trump ad-libbing.
Oh, yeah. And you could always tell when he goes back to the teleprompter, you got something beautifully written. And then he starts talking about, all these other things.